Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Edwards, and welcome to Connecting to the Stars. I'm excited to be here with my special guest and friend, Dave Wallace, for fun and exciting conversation. Hi, Dave. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. How are you, sweetie?
I'm good. Great to have you here. So,
It's great to be here.
oh, good. Well, our topic today is Beyond Earth Sentience, and we'll dive into after a brief background on Dave. You'll learn he has a big thirst for learning and exploring and making life more interesting for those who come into his orbit. Dave is smart, curious, loves life here on Earth and in the beyond as an ET contactee. He got a graduate degree in enology in wine, a bachelor's of thermodynamics, a master's in astrophysics. From the age of 12 until he was 18, he lived and worked with big cats, meaning real lions, following in his mother's footsteps, caring for lions on the Shambhala Preserve with actress Tippi Hedren. He left the seminary at age 18, landing at Ukiah Research Institute, where he lived for 4 years with theological philanthropist Wallace McDonald. He then attended Fresno State and picked up a bachelor's in enology with a minor in thermal engineering. He made wine and cognac for several years in Mendocino, California, then joined the food industry with Mike Burbank, who owned Bristol Farms. Mike was Luther Burbank's nephew. He then met and married Dustin Hoffman's nanny, Alison Kennedy, who was from East Yorkshire, England. So they moved to the UK, where he opened high-end wine and spirit shops and became a specialist, winning awards and traveling around Europe and Russia. He later quit drinking, moved back to his hometown in Hermosa Beach, where he sits today, and he and his son William run and operate Southern California's only 100% all-natural ingredient pie shop and bakery. Dave loved turning his acumen towards nutritional products and public awareness into this new project. Now he has an open road before him. He feels he's been very fortunate to live many lives in just this one so far, and you have packed it in. His meeting sentient species from off Earth was only a matter of time, he supposes. So let's have him come on stage with you all and explain his wonderful story. So I don't know if you'd like to start with big cats, because that's such an incredible story, and then lead us through how you ended up having your ET contact, why, when it happened, and because I'm sure that everyone would love to hear your story. So take it away.
Well, I was very blessed. I mean, my mother was the lead cat behaviorist for the actress Tippi Hedren for 35 years, and Tippi and my mom were very best friends, and they rescued big cats and brought them to the Shambhala, where they could live in these giant open air compounds that were full of beautiful sand and trees and rivers that run through them, and it was a magical time. It was such a wonderful experience to me, because being near those super large 500-pound lions that my mother used to just walk right in with a hairbrush and brush their manes, because she had raised them since they were tiny. And Tippi is kind of like a stepmom for me, and I grew up with Melanie Griffiths, her daughter, and Noel Marshall's kids. And my experience took me up also into the high desert, because the Shambhala Preserve is in the San Gabriel Mountains north of Los Angeles, and they're very ancient Chumash Indian stomping grounds, really.
Wow.
And so I used to hike 2, 3, 4,000 miles up above and around or 3,400 feet up above and around the preserve, and collect geodes and crystals. And I would sit for hours just observing places where Native Americans used to sit in spall arrowheads and listen to the wind and watch the wildlife. And I learned how to live up in the high desert when it's 115 degrees, and to hike around without water for 2 or 3 days. And So I learned a lot of life skills, the skills that most children at the time don't get. I mean, you think of what children are put through these days, and living in cities and suburbs and going to school every day and having a regimentalized program. I was very free, and I was allowed to follow my own esoteric desires. And of course, living on the Shambhala Preserve with Tippy, I was
Mm-hmm.
given no end of entertainment from all of her fabulous friends, whether it was, Brooke Shields or Peter O'Toole. And we had so many wonderful people coming by the ranch. And of course, my mother had collected an enormous amount of beautiful people in her life, like George and Joy Adams from Born Free and Jacques Cousteau, just amazing human beings. So I was very fortunate, and I could go on for hours. I'm writing a book about my experience on the Shambhala Preserve, and it's taken a long time because I have thousands of photographs to winnow through and things like that, and it's taking a while. My my mom stayed with Tippy for many years, and then moved to New Mexico to be with Zuni Pueblo and Navajo people at Four Corners, or actually in Rama.
Mm-hmm.
And then she started working for Candy Kitchen's Wolf Preserve in her retirement. And rather than run the circuit and do dissertations at universities about big cats, she spent her time meditating with Native Americans because she knew she was coming closer to the end of the cycle of her period on this planet. So she did what was right for her soul, which was very respectable. And I moved up to Mendocino County and I met Wallace McDonald and studied philosophy and science for 4 years straight. It was an accredited seminary, and come to find out much later that by the time I was 21, I had already gotten an associate science degree in critical thinking, which was pretty cool. But they turned me on to things like Teilhard de Chardin and Dr. Georg Grodek and P.D. Ouspensky and Gurdjieff and all the wonderful writers, Socrates and Aristotle and, Dickens and all the classics. So they made sure that I was well read by the time I was out the door when I was 21.
Wow.
I think that was very important too, because it's awfully important to be well spoken and to be able to discuss many different topics. And if we are going to heal the planet and cruise around the planet and meet lots of people, it's nice to be well read and well spoken and have some command of the English language and be able to draw upon our history of the wonderful literature that's been written and draw upon those allegories and those metaphors from the past and see how they oftentimes reflect exactly what's happening in today's contemporary society. So I was pretty much well on my way to being able to handle what happened to me by the time I was taken away to the Taurus star system in a very large ship. And I'm proud of what I.
What year was that? I can't remember. What year was that?
They came and took me out of my house on January 7th, 2017.
So I remember you had been inviting them to come too for a long time.
Well,
It's
that's
a beautiful
interestingly
process.
right, right, and there's that old caveat: be careful what you wish for,
Right.
because it really is true.
Yes.
Uh, when you manifest the reality of your desire, then it changes the paradigm of reality completely.
Yes.
And what we think we know must be very little, because what I thought I knew from my amazing life, I mean, I even spent 12 years in Europe teaching wine and food chemistry and conducting international wine tastings and meeting heads of state. And I worked as an ambassador in the trade industry I worked for the British government for a year and traveled to Russia and the Ukraine, developing trade contacts to help the Ukraine back in 2011 get into the EU. Everything that I'd done in my life purely by happenstance. And I was just being polite and being happy go lucky. And all these doors open for me just by being a nice person.
Mm-hmm.
Grandfather used to tell me that when you travel to other countries, you must always be at your best behavior because you represent your country. Therefore, you're an ambassador. And of course, I always listened to my grandfather. So even at the age of 30, I went there thinking that I was representing my country. I was a little naive. I know that silly things and bad things happen, but I always kept a cool demeanor and opened doors for people, and found that the same door was being opened for me at the same time. When I was working on my bakery and concentrating on understanding nutrition and how things that pregnant couples eat affect the development of their fetus, I spent an awful lot of time researching nutrition and higher chemistry, brain functions, neural pathway functions, and neural development. And I was thinking maybe I'll go to school and get a medical degree, because it's never too late in life. I mean, I'm 57, and I'm thinking of flip-flopping what I've got so far on paper into a PhD in neuroscience. And that's going to be 10 years, but I'll be 67 by the time I get my PhD. It's no big deal. So in 2016, my son and we only live a mile and a half away. Normally we take our bicycles to the bakery because we live here at the beach. We're very fortunate. And I decided to take my car. So we were driving up the coast to my home, and my son noticed a big blue orb, a bright teal, green, and blue orb floating above the car. And, as young people do, they like to hang out of car windows as you're driving. And he said, pull over, pull over. And so I pulled over, and he jumped out of the car and stood there. And I got out to see what he was looking at. And I was amazed. There was a ball that looked like sort of an oversized beach ball, that about that size, but it was about 100 meters above the car, and it was pulsating a blue and green light. I'd never seen anything like it before. And traveling the world, and I've been to 32 different countries and met a lot of people, I have seen some strange stuff, but nothing this curious or odd. So we stood there agape, and it flashed very brightly, two flashes, and then it shot straight up into the sky. And it was at twilight, so it was in the evening, and we watched it, and it looked like a shooting star going out into deep stellar space, because it became brighter as it passed our upper ionosphere. And so my son and I looked at each other, and we knew right away this wasn't a terrestrial vehicle. This is not Terran. This is no matter how hard they try down at Skunk Works or NASA, they haven't quite got to this point. So we knew that we had just been visited by some form of extrasensory enabled, extra wonderful species from another planet. So we did the thing that everybody does, is we did a whole lot of research, and we researched on YouTube, and we researched on the internet, and we started buying books, and we spent 2 months researching what these phenomena are. And my mother had mentioned in the past that she used to see strange lights in the sky above the Lion Ranch, and well, to no wonder, I am sure that she had been communicated with, though she was never very verbose about that sort of thing, but she did say she recognized unusual lights above the ranch. After 2 or 3 months of research, my son and I realized that probably 90% or 95% of the information that's available, whether it's a government source or a paper written by a scientist, or whether it's just a human being that's recorded their belief, about 90% or more was pretty much rubbish. And we weren't harmonizing or resonating with any of the information. So my son and I decided to sit on my balcony overlooking the ocean and pick a point in space and just concentrate on that. And we did that every night from 8 p.m. until 9:30 or 10 p.m. And we did that every night religiously for 7 months. We forsake all of our social engagements, we forsake all of our relationships, and we sat there every night. Well, after about 30 days, we started seeing ships, and they would fly in from deep stellar space, and they would stop at the point of space where we were looking at. We realized that these species were obviously highly psychic, and that there must be some energy that comes from our minds that they can sense. So when they're flying above our planet, perhaps there was some sort of needle of energy that they were able to pick up on. And so they would stop, and then they would come in. And we would be watching any number of strange, unusual, glowing craft from 8:45 to 9:30, and they would always come to the same place that we looked at up into deep stellar space. So we knew that they knew we were looking. Well, on one of those occasions, I decided to reach out with them with my mind. And I've always understood that psychic abilities are real and that people have different levels of ESP. And, anybody that denies that's just lying to themselves. So I sent them a message and I said, can you flash me a coordinated signal to let me know that you are looking at me and you understand my thoughts? And just within seconds of thinking that, there was a coordinated group of flashing lights that were so bright and so well controlled that it looked like our balcony was flashing. They had sent a beam from their ship, and it impacted both my son and I, went right into our eyes, and we both felt some form of cognitive understanding. As soon as that happened, I had the presence of mind to say thank you, and it disappeared. It didn't fly away. It just went out. The lights went out. Well, the very next day, I didn't know anything about downloads. I didn't know anything about instructions. I didn't know anything about, I had no higher cognition about communicating to people through packages of light.
Or telepathy, or right. Yeah.
Right. So what that ship had done is something that I call patterning. And I've developed a whole science about this over the last 6 years. I've been writing papers for the AGU and the American Physics Society and Copernicus Observer and a lot of other scientific websites. And I've been in touch with Dr. Professor Sir Richard Friend, who's the head of physics at Cambridge University, and some people at Heidelberg that I know. And of course, some people at NASA and SpaceX that came into my life after my experience. They had patterned me to understand what the next visit was going to be. And I had been prepared with 5 or 10 different simple rules to follow when communicated to. So I shared them with my son, and we sat there, and sure enough, right at 8 o'clock this time, 3 ships came in from different areas, and they were all different. One was yellow and glowing, one was white, one was blue, red, and green and orange. And at different times, each of the ships, they would sort of rotate into a different position. And by the time the 3rd ship was looking at us, they had been flashing a coordinated series of deep, powerful laser beams right at us. And come to find out much later is that light information travels down our optic nerve. It stimulates our parietal lobes, which are these 2 sort of football-shaped lobes in our back of our head, which cognate, and they coordinate light images, and then they send that information down our diencephalon, which is a chamber, a communication chamber in between our 2 cerebrum. You have your left and your right hemisphere. Well, come to find out that one of the best ways to communicate to human beings is to put lots and lots of information into a flash of light. They can do it. So it wasn't until later that I understood lots and lots of different theories and lots of different formulas and equations. But of course, I fell upon Einstein and de Broglie's theorem about light packages. And I quickly understood that our visitors from other worlds are able to put thousands of pieces of information into a light pulse and send it into our eyes. Our brain, which is an amazing 125 million year old supercomputer, instantaneously takes that information, translated into an enzymatic response of enzymes or amino acids, and puts an electrical charge behind that or within that, and sends it to a coordinating region within our mind, whether it's logical or creative, and places those informations on their own. So when you receive a flash of light, It coordinates, it cognates, it generates an electrochemical signal, and then fires off into the rest of your brain, all within a split second. But all those little pieces of information go to where they belong. And so later, when you think you have an aha moment, Buddhists call it a Sartori and Catholics call it an epiphany. Really, it's not any of those things. It's they gave you a really good idea. And after flashing you several times, there's a coordination process where you'll see that last ship and he'll give you one more flash. And that's the trigger that causes all of that collated information to go and turn into one idea, and then you cognate. And so the information they give us, even when we look at the ships, that flashing information are patterning processes that I call continuous light pulse technology and continuous light pulse flash, CLPT and CLPF. And it's a science that I've been developing to understand the way that they formulate whole groups of theories, whole groups of ideas, and give them to us. And when we're ready electrochemically and when we are ready emotionally, all of those ideas gel and then we activate them. We act upon them. So sometimes when you look at a ship and it's flashing, it's actually embedding you and you don't know. But later it will be of some benefit to you. I mean, they got me. I was terrible at mathematics when I went to school, and whatever they did to me when they took me away, and I kind of know, and it's a very long story, but I went to school and studied astrophysics and quantum mechanics because I needed to validate the stuff that they showed me. And as it turns out, everything that I went through was absolutely real, 100% correct. And the experience was amazing. So after 6 or 7 months of sitting on our balcony, I started telling them, I'm ready to meet you. And I know that you love our species, and I know that you love the earth and that you love animals just like we do. But we could really use some help getting all of this stuff that the horrible people that are running the planet, we need to get them we need to get them out, or we need to raise them up overnight so that they realize, my God, what have I been doing to the planet? And to feel shame, and then they could understand forgiveness. I mean, I'm very much opposed to war. I'm very much opposed to the proliferation of any kind of nuclear energy, especially in regards to weaponry. But I'm not opposed to governments. If we're going to have governments, we have to stop attacking them. We have to realize that they're all in trouble and be kind and help them. I mean, there's a lot of people in government that are nice people that need our help, but there's an awful lot of terrible things that are being done in the name of governments. So I told them I wanted to meet them. And I had a very warm feeling that everything that they're trying to tell us about beyond Earth sentience is a lie. They are not insectoids that have exoskeletons that want to suck your brain out of your head. They're very, very delicate, very sweet, soft, smooth-skinned, very kind, fragile little creatures. They're very fragile and they're very dear, and they think in communication with each other, and they have to pause when they're with us because it's very sad on the evolutionary process. I mean, we're like brain damaged Neanderthals, and so they
and all that stuff.
They pity us. They pity us so much. But they do love us because we are a form of children, and we're also part of what they are or what they were.
Yes.
They one of the reasons they want to connect with us is that they get the love return. See, the dimension that we exist in, this third dimension in which we cognate our reality, is so very special because it supports life. And that's not new to them, but it's apparently sadly new to a lot of human beings. And when I look at the extraterrestrial community as a whole, I see a lot of people trying to vibrate higher or to meditate to a higher frequency or perhaps to attain a higher dimension. And I always tell people they should slow down and first understand this dimension, understand what it is to be love and what it is to be healing and coordinating and attached to it, because this is really the most important dimension of all of them. We can talk about extra dimensionality and interdimensionality and the science and the specifics about quantum mechanics about those things later. So they came into my room but not before 11 p.m., 10:19 to 11 p.m. that night. They came in and got me at midnight, but at 10:19, I took my Japanese Akita out for a walk. Well, my son and my then girlfriend at the time were up, and they were watching A Legend of Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp, which is a fantastically funny film. I was on the balcony having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and I came in and I looked at my girlfriend and I said, "Do me a favor and don't lock the sliding glass door." And I looked at William and I said, "Don't be alarmed if four little people come in here late at night. Just be calm and ignore it." And he looked at me and giggled, and I went to bed. Well, when I took my dog out right after right before I told them those things, I went outside, took my dog out. A massive black disc that was so huge and so black that it blacked out the stars, but it had a line of lights. And I'll go ahead and shoot you a couple pictures of it. Hovered over me about a quarter mile up. All the lights in my neighborhood went out, and it slowly rotated. But it wasn't. It was oblated. Sat like this up in the sky, and it rotated. And my dog curled up around my feet and passed out just like that. And I went, "I would love to see your ship. If you could turn it around, can I take some pictures?" And it flashed some lights, and then all these lights started showing up on the ship so I could see the size of it. It was about the size of 3 or 4 aircraft carrier. It was absolutely massive. After a few moments, I snapped off about 21 photographs, and they all came out great. And they're going to blow your mind when I shoot you a few. It shot straight up into outer space. I could hear the air collapse back into the space that it withdrew from, like a little snapping sound. But it went up into deep space in the about the same speed as a bolt of lightning. So I was very excited that I had some really fantastic photographs of an interstellar conveyance. And it was then that I decided to change the acronyms and the nomenclature that I used when I was just trying to describe these fabulous ships. They're not UAP, and they're not UFO. They're not at all. And we have to be very careful about the way we intellectualize and accept someone else's information and use that as common day nomenclature, everyday patter, everyday nomenclature. Oh, I saw a UAP. Well, that means nothing. That is a mentally crippling military term that they want you to call them. What they are is interstellar conveyance. It's a mode of conveyance to go from one section or quadrant of the galaxy to the next, or perhaps far, far beyond that. They move very, very quickly. I've been privy to 3 or 4 different types of propulsion system, which I'm still studying. And thank God I took physics and quantum mechanics, because the stuff is just wonderful. And it's all this, just, we'll talk about it in the future. So they came into my bedroom. Everybody was out. My girlfriend was passed out. I couldn't wake her up. Not that I wanted to. One of them, how they woke me up was fascinating, and we're still friends today. And I have pictures of them in my bakery. All right. I have a very special relationship because I have no hate and I have no anger. And when you remove your ego and you remove hate and anger, they immediately fall in love with you and they want to hang out with you, because when they hold your hand, they can reconnect to their ancient past. They don't feel love the way that we do. They understand life and they understand the concept of love and passion, but they don't feel them. Mm-hmm. And it's from many, many millennia of traveling in outer space. They have a relationship with each other, and they have a relationship with space, and they have a relationship with their ships. But all they're interested in doing is cataloging, categorizing, and studying fascinating things. Every one of the species that I've ever come into contact with or have been communicated to by have all expressed their great interest in science and to be an observer, to not be involved, but to say, oh, look how beautiful everything is. They are scientists, and all of them, they all fly around looking at crystals and looking at galaxies and nebulas, and they're fabulous. All they want to do is study. So this little guy whose name is Toth, and it's It's not Thoth or Toth or some Egyptian god. His name is Toth. It's Toth or Tothe. He's little. He's blue and gray, and he's about 3.5 feet tall, and he has a bulbous head, and he has huge dark blue eyes. Well, I'm sleeping on my side, on my edge of my, Cal King bed, and he takes his little cool forehead and he presses it up against mine to wake me up.
Oh, sweet.
And I open my eyes, and there's these two giant dark blue eyes, and they blink. And I heard right away in my head, David, head warm, feel nice.
Oh, oh, so sweet.
Right. And then he said, I'm your friend. We're going to take you to meet somebody you want to meet. And I knew right away they'd come to collect me and that they'd answered my call. So they sat me up in bed. I sleep in the buff anyway, so it wasn't hard. They took a green towel that was kind of scrubby, a big towel, and they wiped me down, and it smelled like iodine. It smelled like, cockles and brine and seaweed. And they washed me down with this iodine stuff, and they put like a cotton tunic on me. And it just covered my bits. It didn't have to be huge. And then I was out. I don't remember how they took me out, but there was 3 of them. And number 1, Toth, was admonishing 2 and 3 to be gentle with me. And there was this other one who's taller, and he's about 4.5 feet tall. And he was the only one that had a symbol on his tunic. It was a starburst. And I call him Bob because I've seen him before, and I don't know what his name is. So I just call him Bob. I've never liked that name very much, so I just call him Bob. So all of a sudden, I'm standing in the sand in Manhattan Beach, but I'm actually floating above the sand on a flat blue light platform. Toth has my left hand, and number 2 has my right hand. And they're just holding my hand like this, and I'm floating. And as we're traveling across the sand, this is like 1:30 in the morning in Manhattan Beach, down at 28th Street. All the lights on the Strand went out. All the lights so that you could see all went out. The ship's above us. But on the beach is this trapezoidal blue glowing, it looked like gelatine that you couldn't see through, but it was a form of touchable plasma. You could touch it. It was like fabric, but it was made from light. So while they're gliding me towards this, it was trapezoidal. It looked like a 1920s, beach cart tent, the striped ones that you would change your outfit in, right? But it had doors like scissors that opened like this. And while they're gliding me to this tent, they're downloading hundreds of pieces of information. And Toth is looking at me going, special day for you. Keep loving your heart. And the other one is going, don't show your teeth, bow to the council when you meet the council. But they're giving me all this etiquette to meet my friend Kim Jim. And Kim Jim is an ambassador from the Taurus cloud. And he took me to a planet called Bro Kali, which is not far from Aldebaran, the big yellow star. He took me to a terraformed planet. So I went in, they left me at the door. I walked in, and I noticed I was getting pins and needles in my feet. I walked through this massive blue part of the tent. And the tent on the outside was very tiny, but when I got inside, it was huge. And then I walked down another colored blue fabric hallway, and the whole time the fabric was sort of waving very softly. And then there was this bright light, white blue room that I turned the corner. There was a white light panel hanging. It was like a thin box. It was about 2 inches deep, 2 foot by 1 foot, and it produced all the light in the room. And at the opposite end of the room is Kim Jim, and he's wearing a black tunic. He's fabulously beautiful. He's about 4.5 foot tall. He has an elongated skull, like a Paracas skull, and big blue eyes. And he was on a cube, a settee that was just a big cube, like a rectangle. And he had his legs up, and he had his toes curled in. He had 3 toes and 3 long fingers, and he patted it with his hand, and he thought to me, and I heard his voice. He said, come over and sit with me, David. We have a lot to talk about. So I sat down with him. He held my hand, and his fingers were so long, it wrapped around my wrist twice. And he didn't hold hard. He just gently held on to me. And he leaned in a little bit and looked. He was maybe a foot and a half away from me. And he said, "How do you feel?" And I started crying right away, just buckets of tears, buckets. And he said, he basically said, "They're there." And he put his hand on my shoulder and he says, "Let me know when you're done." And so I sort of stopped after about 2 minutes of just bawling. I don't know where it came from. And he says it happens to people who need an adjustment. So he took his other hand and he put it against the side of my face, just touched it like this. And in a period of about 30 seconds, every form of guilt, every form of anger or hatred, every bad experience I'd ever had was just taken away. And it was like an anvil that was sitting on the back of my neck that I didn't deserve, that had been there since I was 2 years old, gone for good. And of course I started crying again. And when I cleared myself up and I looked at Kim Jim, I said, "What's happened to me?" And he goes, "We need to talk about emotional chemistry and how the human brain works. And then I'm going to take you into your past lives. And I'm going to show you how long we've been working with you." And I said, "Well, why are you showing me this? Why did you do what you just did to me?" He goes, "David, you asked for our help. And we're here. And we felt bad for you. We felt bad that we've been manipulating you for 2 past lives. And you had bad deaths in both of those past lives where you suffered terribly and you weren't supposed to. And here we're manipulating again in this thread. We've been manipulating you since day one. We manipulated your mother. We manipulated your grandparents and your great-grandparents. We have been working with your family for hundreds of years. And your soul arrived in 1910, 1905, and we started manipulating you, but you were different. Out of all the family that we have manipulated your string, you were different. And you realized that something was going on. You knew. And we can't let you go insane because we understand that you realize that when you close your eyes, you're with a different family on a different planet. But when you open your eyes, you're back on Earth. And something like this, unless it's explained properly, can be very traumatic for a human being. So we feel very sorry that we've done what we did. So we are going to allow you to pass this experience on to us. We're going to accept all of the pain, all the trauma, and all of the things you never understood. And we will accept responsibility for them and remove them from you. Are you ready to go back to see who you were? And I said, yes. And he put his hand back on my face, just on the side of my head. And there I was, dressed as a 1930s flat-foot Brooklyn police officer with a crenellated cop hat and a big heavy pea coat. It was the winter, and I'm walking up the steps of a brownstone, and there's a federal agent inside. And I knock on the door, and he opens the door, and he hands me a Ziploc baggie, because they had them back in the 30s, because it was alien tech. And it had about 30 tiny little humanoids in it. They were white, and they were all dead. And he said, "We found another location." And I said, okay. And I took them and put them in my pocket and closed the door. And then we funneled forward because I died. I had a very bad death. And I was shot in the head by gangsters or something in New York. That wasn't supposed to happen. But then the next scene was I died when I was 23 in World War II. And apparently I was very well liked. And I was a wing gunner on a B-29 in the Pacific campaign. And we were flying sorties over Kwajalein, Mindanao, Inuiatok, and a couple other islands when I had a magnesium round went right through my head and killed me. And he explained why I like the things that I like in this life and how the responsibility of what you love is always attached in some way to your past existence. You know, and I've always had an affinity for law enforcement. That's why I was involved with law enforcement for 4 years. Grandfather was in law enforcement all of his life into the higher echelons. And then, you know, I've always liked World War II history and always felt a very strong connection to that ever since I was a little boy. And so he explained to me why all of those things happened the way they did. But after he took away that horrible guilt that none of us deserve, you know, he said that all human beings are born perfect and that we accept trauma like sponges. He said children on his planet grow up in rooms full of flowers and they play with little animals and everything's a beautiful experience. There's never any anger or hatred around them. There's never any want. There's no, you know, mom and dad fighting over, you know, having enough money to buy clothes for the kids, you know, because your kids hear this stuff when they're in a room and they're 3 years old and they're soft little impressionable sponges and this stuff embeds. And he says that humans don't know how to raise their children. You need to get all of it into the kid's head by the time they're 5 or 7, because the logic centers form all the way by the time they exactly turn 8 years old. And you have to embed your children properly. And he says most of the children on your planet all hear your parents arguing, and then you have a nasty aunt that comes over and pinches you, and then your brother smashes a toy that you liked. And he says those are all terrible things that screw you up. So he goes, here, I've removed them. And then he got closer again and said, now how do you feel?
Oh.
So once again, you know, tears, boom. And I'm drying my tears, and then he looked at me and he goes, he sort of nods his head and goes, are you ready to go? And I started crying softly because no, I don't want to go. I want to sit with you. You know, you've just made me feel better than anything I've ever experienced in my life. You've just made it for me. Everything that I ever wanted all came in the gift of meeting this little man named Kim Jim. And I thought he was going to take me back to my home and put me back to sleep. And he goes like this, no, no, no. So then I just couldn't hide my joy. And then soon afterwards, we were walking down the sand. The tent was being collapsed, and the others that were there earlier were gone. But I watched the tent turn into a beam of light and go up. And then I felt this very strong tingling pulling on the back of my neck. And he said, hold on to my hand, don't let go. And we both were teleported up into the bottom of the ship. And we went up a good 7 or 8 miles because I watched California shrink below us. And the floor in the ship opened up and then it closed seamlessly below us. And Kim Jim put me on another light platform made out of light, blue light, and it had a railing, just like a kind of like an escalator railing in a department store, only it was made out of blue light. And I could see how big the ship was, and we're below middeck, and there was lots of different species traveling on all these little escalator platforms all over the ship. And he showed me the magnetic drive and how the bottom of the ship is where all the engineering is. And then we took this long escalator ride up. It must have been 100 meters or 150 meters up to the mid deck. And there the floor opened up in a similar fashion and then closed. And Kim Jim let go of my hand. He brought me down off the platform and said, David, I will see you again in 2 years exactly to this date. He says, I'm going to leave you now, and I'm introducing you to Erom, who will take you to Weimar. Listen to Erom and Weimar and have a wonderful visit. I will see you in 2 years. And then he said, I love you very much. Right? So Erom was this beautiful sort of little, she had freckles, but they looked like reticulated freckles, like on a giraffe, only they were smaller and they were all over. She had a pink and orange dress on, but it had little sparkles on them that looked like hearts. And she had long, thin black hair, very silky, and big, dark green eyes, and lots of freckles. And she was absolutely adorable, very alluring, and very, I don't know, very sexy. She walked me across the deck, which was vast, and it was a black glass floor. And in the center of the floor were these giant polished, what looked like obsidian sarsens in the form of like Stonehenge, only they didn't have the lentil stones on top. It was just the Sarsens standing up in a circle. And then in the middle of that were two more that were control panels that had lots and lots of lights and buttons on them. Above that center circle was a hologram of the Earth and the Moon. And in the middle of those two control panels were these very tall yellow beings that looked like grasshoppers. And they had beautiful, beautiful, sparkly gemstone gowns on. It went from their chest all the way to their feet. But you could see the backs of their calves and their knees were almost looked like they were backwards, like a grasshopper's leg. And they were doing this. They were manipulating the buttons on these things. They had their backs to each other. And EROM said very carefully, don't look at the controllers. They're not particularly fond of your species. You may gaze upon them with peripheral vision only. And so we quickly walked past them. And then I met Weimer. And Weimer was this almost 9 foot tall, very skinny, yellow skinned fellow with little black almond eyes who was a scientist. And he folded me into my special chair, which I never made contact with. It was like a green tubular lawn chair that you lean against, but your bottom never touches it. And it has this armature. So he has you lay there like this. And it's not restrictive at all. He just folds these big green arms around it like a cage, but it's made of light. And then I realized the chair actually wasn't attached to the floor of the ship either. It just sat in situ in front of this fabulous crystal window. And the window was probably 2 feet thick, was about 15 feet high and about 25 feet long, and then went all around the entire edge of the ship, except for one small part of the ship. And I looked to my left and I could see hundreds of chairs where there was other passengers. And then immediately to my right, I was in a group of 4 chairs. The one right to my immediate right was empty, but then there was this other really good looking sort of yuppie couple, and they were knocked out. So Weimer said, I guess it's been agreed that you're allowed to remember everything about your visit, David. So this is the part everybody likes the most. And so the ship raised up away from the Earth, and I could see South America. I could see Martinique and Cuba, and it was fabulous. And then when the ship came up, we were in a vast armada of massive, massive silver ships with light blue lights around them. There was 50 of them, and I was the 5th one back in the right of the V. I was over here, and there was 4 more on the right-hand side, and they were like a giant V. And I'm watching the window, and he goes, watch very quickly. And the window looked like it split. There was an electric crack in space. And do you remember those old hand crank dryers for your washing machine, right? My grandmother had one. Well, the bottom part of space in this line in the window started rolling down, and the top part of space above this electrical crack started rolling up, and all of a sudden the stars were no longer visible. It was just light. But then this electrical crack became massive, like a giant continual thunderbolt that was releasing these blue and white and silver balls, and all the ships flew into this crack, and we flew into that for about 2.5 hours. It was a long flight, maybe 3 hours. The whole time, Weimer talked to me about any questions I had. And he realized that I was a maths dunce, and that I knew absolutely nothing about Maxwell's theory of electromagnetism. I knew nothing about Einstein and de Broglie's theorem. I knew nothing about relativity. I had no clue about anything except a little bit of thermodynamics from State College 25, 30 years previous. You know, how much information about science do we retain when we're 22? I would say it's negligible because it's just not important to us. So he touched me just like Spock touches people when he does a Vulcan mind meld. Weimer took his long yellow fingers and he went like this, like that, and downloaded all of this amazing mathematics. And I was asking questions pretty soon about micrometeorite showers, what protects the ship, what's the propulsion system, how do you control that? You know, is there sound in space? Talk to me about frequencies. I was off the charts asking all kinds of stuff. And I realized many years later that I have a feeling that Weimer just felt bad that he got stuck with the naked, stupid monkey. And he downloaded all that mathematics so that he'd have something interesting to talk about for the trip.
Upgrade.
So it was, it was a special moment. We eventually came to Broccoli, and space in that far away from Earth, space, it's 64 million light years away. And the space is colored. It's pink and purple and golden and sparkly. It's not black. It's beautiful. It's lavender and unbelievably pretty. And there was a manufactured black hole that's in situ near the solar system where we came in to land. And as soon as the ships, the black hole is probably a good light year away from the ships, or half a light year, maybe 50 parsecs. But it was just powerful enough to arrest the speed of the ships. They use a small manufactured black hole to stop the ships because they're traveling at 7,889,000 kilometers per second. Okay. And it still takes 2.5 hours to get to Taurus. And that's some speed. And so they use black holes, and in this case, in this species, this technology, they use black holes. I found out much later that the technology comes from a being called a mantid, a praying mantis being. That they create that. The praying mantises have the real hardcore technology of the exotic, very difficult stuff. They're the ones that produce them. So the ship was going, and then it just stopped, and then it slowly glided down towards this beautiful verdant planet. And it was, rich terracotta soil, dark azul skies, beautiful blue, and all the trees were the same. They all looked like translucent dark green broccoli, but they were all like 200 feet tall. And it was funny that the planet's called Broccoli because Kim Jim, on his second visit to my home 2 years later, he corrected me. He goes, "David, please, it's not the broccoli planet. It's Broccoli." And I'm like, "Oh my God." He says, "All the trees look like broccoli." He goes, "Yes, we understand." He goes, "Yes, we understand that now." We didn't know. But it's the trees have nothing to do with the name of the planet. It's just those are terraform trees. They produce a hideous amount of oxygen and nitrogen. We plant them, they grow like that, and all of a sudden the planet's easy to breathe. Wow. There's only one type of grass. It has 3 leaves. And so I got Weimer in trouble, I guess, because I never saw him again. During disembarkation, when all the ships are landing in this huge, sparkly white, looked like cement with diamonds in it, crushed diamonds in it. Vast. It was like maybe a 10 square mile platform with giant stairs and temples everywhere. All the ships came down to land, and they're huge ships. So you can imagine how big the ramps are. The ramps come out 200 feet, 300 feet above, right below midships, and they come down, and here come a myriad of species. There was probably 150 different types of species just on my ship that I didn't get to know when I was taking my trip. But I'm watching them all disembark, and you know what, Mary? They were all holding hands.
Oh, and you know what, Dave, I have to say, I hate to do this. Our time is up. We have only a couple more minutes, but oh my God. So we're going to end on holding hands. We're going to interview part 2 or part 3
Sure.
because I'm sorry, our time is up in a minute.
Okay.
But holding hands, what a story. What a beautiful, heartfelt, loving story.
It was all 100% real. It was all 100% real.
Of course it was. When I got taken up at 5 and 6 and 10, it's just unbelievable, the love and the compassion and how protected we are when we beings are here to help the planet. And that's why we are in this huge evolution. We're in a revolution and this shift of the new age that's coming in, and we are all here to play our part. I happen to do art and interiors and architecture and space, and I've been doing it off planet since I was 10 years old, and I was up at
we are all being activated
a month ago. We are all being activated because that's what they do. And thank God and thank Source and thank all our angels and all our benevolent, beautiful ETs. And I could sit here, and everyone I'm sure could sit here for the next 5 hours and continue, but this is part one of the beautiful Dave Wallace. And we're going to shoot another one really in the next week or two, and it will be part two.
Well, it was
Beyond
so
Earth
lovely. Thank you.
Sentience.
It was very
Anyway,
lovely.
that was one of the most beautiful stories that I heard, more of this time since we've talked at length, which is great. And I can't wait to interview you again. I can't wait to have you come back, and we're going to do Beyond Earth Sentience Part 2, and we're going to have a 3 and a 4 too. I love you, Dave Wallace. You are a gift to Mother Earth and Father Sky, and thank you for sharing these beautiful details of your journey. It's just out of this world. So
It certainly is.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. God bless you too, sweetie.
I love you. Thank you
I
so
love
much.
you too. You're
All
welcome.
righty.
Thank you.
Signing
Bye.
off now. Till next time.
All right. Bye bye.
All righty. Love you.